2:03 p.m. So, public comment and announcements. Anyone from the public wishing to make any comments? Seeing none. Actually, I probably should read here. As required by open meeting law, you are hereby informed that the town will video and audio tape this public meeting. Anyone who plans to video or audio tape this meeting must notify the chairman now. Seeing none. Okay, so we will move on. No public comments or announcements.
Can I ask, if I want to add something in, where can I do that? That's not on the agenda?
When do we do it now? Under public comments?
Okay. So I saw the thing from the attorney. I'm glad that went through, because we want you guys to get paid. And I hope you understand why I put that forward. I've had companies that did procurement, and I wanted to make sure that we actually had legal counsel on that, because other procurement officers would see it differently. So I'm glad we got the legal count on that. However, in the attorney's response, there's a notation that, you told him that it almost sounds like you asked the request, not the request coming from the Board of Selectmen. And I think that's significant. And then it also says that you identified yourself as the chair, which is great, which brings me to another question. Went through the minutes of the CPC, the Community Preservation Committee, and in June 13th, at their meeting, you presented to them about 40 Bs, and down in the minutes it says, quote, for example, one project idea would require $3 million from Harwich, end quote. Why are these things not brought before this committee? Why are you acting as an independent agent? Why is the Housing Trust not working as a unit on these sort of things? Why are you only giving us information after the fact? To me, that may be a violation of open meeting law. You are representing this committee on the Community Preservation Committee. And I had no knowledge about this, and it upsets me. I have served on committees for 30 years in different capacities, at the municipal level, at the state level, at the federal level, and internationally. And I don't get it, Chris. A chair, under Robert's rules, you're just administrating. It doesn't allow you as an individual to go off and do things for the committee. That's not the way it works.
Well, the way you characterize it is not what happened. So I think
I'm reading the notes.
Look, I gave you the opportunity.
I'm not characterizing anything.
I gave you the opportunity.
I'm not characterizing anything. I'm reading directly from the notes that were approved on July 11th.
Yeah,
so please do not use that word.
I would prefer not to have these meetings be like the Board of Selectmen's meetings where
I would prefer it as well.
Uncivilized.
But we can't talk about this outside of the meeting.
Judith, may I be allowed to speak?
As long as you do not use that word characterize. Because I'm not. I'm reading from minutes, and I want to understand.
I have a dual responsibility in some respects. At this point, this board elected me to be the chair, so I have a responsibility as chair.
Which means what, perhaps? Maybe that's the question.
We're going to agenda it if we're going to get into too long of a discussion, because you asked a question. I just want to try to get a simple answer to get us started here. In terms of procurement officer, I explained and laid out that the Board of Selectmen, because the trust was informed, entered into a contract. The question that was raised, and I thought the question was a fair question, was how does the Affordable Housing Trust award the contract under the second year of it? And we do have this on the agenda, so we could probably discuss it more under that agenda item.
I just got off the phone with John Giorgio myself.
Yeah, well,
so we'll talk about it.
Yeah, maybe we could talk about that. We'll talk about that issue under that topic, since that is on the topic. The second issue that you raised is, I was asked by the CPC and the Board of Selectmen that the CPC was having a meeting. What are elements or items of concern that the town or CPC needs to know about. So I was there, and in that presentation on June, whatever it was, I spoke about different concepts that I was potentially aware of that could lead to applications in front of CPC. It was as simple as that. The reference that I made to $3 million was I had a person came to me and said, I have a potential project, and this is what the project is. I said, would you like to publicly get on the agenda to lay it out in front of the entire housing trust? They chose not to. So I received an initial inquiry as an individual. I encouraged them to come to the board.
As an
And they
individual, as
chose-
a town manager, or as, town administrator, or as?
I think they came to me initially as town administrator. I encouraged them to formally put it on for the agenda. They chose not to. So if people have concepts, and at the first meeting, I know you missed, I think you may have missed the first or second meeting, so I know you're away. But I said
I
to
didn't-
everyone on the
I was-
board,
Yeah, I
I
wasn't
said-
allowed to give input into my agenda, that's why I missed the first meeting. But
Excuse me, what are we talking about?
I was
She's under,
questioning why
public comment.
in public comment, why in the minutes of the Community Preservation Committee of June 13th, there's this discussion about friendly 40B partnerships and $3 million, and then also referring to the note that just came around from Attorney Giorgio about that, and how my question is, acting as chair on behalf of the trust without the trust's knowledge, and that upset me. And in all my experience serving on committees under Roger's Rule, a chair does not go off and do the work of the committee without the committee's consent.
And
That's-
that's what you were addressing?
And he's,
Yeah, if you could finish that thought, Chris, that we.
he's
we
talking
go
about
back.
what happened at that meeting.
Yeah,
the
I was just
CPC
asked
meeting.
to, CPC, the whole purpose of that was to do a needs assessment in the community. What are the potential needs for eligible projects related to CPC? So I went up, I think I was one of the few people to actually formally testify in front of them. I tried to think of each of their subject areas that they fund, which they fund 4 different subject areas, and to provide different concepts that I had been made aware of that potentially could come before them. It was strictly informational of what was happening. It was not strictly, oh, the trust has this project and we're putting it forward as chair of the trust. I simply said, yes, the community has needs that need to be addressed. If anyone else wanted to attend that meeting to provide information to CPC on what potential needs are, that would have been great. I think unfortunately, there was only a few people that were actually there.
So let me make a recommendation. This sounds to me like a communication gap.
Yeah,
Do I have your attention?
I was at that meeting.
Larry was there.
Yeah, I watched it.
So this, to me,
That's not
sounds,
true. That is a completely different characterization from what I saw for 26.
Okay, we're gonna have to we're gonna have to put it on the formal agenda then, because this is under open,
This has to do.
this is under public
This has to do
comment.
with you saying that you were there on behalf of the Housing Trust, and then started talking about developers having approached us. I am unaware of any of that. And you used a specific figure of $3 million that one of them wanted to get out of the CPC.
You were at the first meeting. You heard that any member of the trust should be open to hearing and understanding what people have
but
for
then not
interest.
going
But then
before
don't talk
another
on behalf
committee
of
and
us.
talk on behalf of us, because that's bad information out to the public. They're gonna hear that and assume that everybody sitting here has already digested all that information and has asked you
Yeah, I don't.
to go forward. That's the problem. We're not criticizing you. We're trying to get, I want to know that when you go and speak for the trust, and everybody on this committee should feel this way, quite frankly, that when any of us speak before another committee on behalf of the trust, it's because everybody agreed to that projects and going forward like that. Because when you're working on affordable housing in any community, you need the complete understanding, the complete buy-in from everyone in the community. Otherwise, that's what riles people, and with good reason, absolutely with good reason. If they don't trust us, the general public, Chris, then we shouldn't be calling ourselves an affordable housing trust, quite frankly. It's really, communication is key to moving any of these projects forward.
May I raise a point of order? The original speaker asked if something might be added to the agenda, and I, as a member of the public, but also someone who asked if it was wished that I attend this meeting and was given approximate time, I believe that a subject that goes on for 12 minutes should be added to the agenda for this meeting or next and should not continue at this time, prioritizing over the order of the agenda. Just a Harwich resident, guest, and member of the public opinion.
Thank you. Yeah, we will move on because that should be agended if you want to have it agended. Please send a request for the topic that you'd like to cover, and that way we can send it to, and you can send it to Belinda and to Charlene, so that we can get it on the agenda.
If you've got that on camera, we want it on the agenda. We don't need it in writing.
I'll send a note.
Just so we have the exact
Sure.
topic that you'd like to cover. Thank you. Next time, through the chair, please. On the approval of the minutes for July 18th, do I have a motion?
I would move the minutes be approved as published.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous? Thank you. The next topic is discussion and potential vote on the Community Preservation Act CPC applications presented. I just put this on that we have the annual request and then also specific projects, and the one that we had talked about previously, discussion regarding joint application and prioritization of Deacon's Folly. So on the annual request, I was curious about what the interest is of the board to see. We have put in 2 requests previously to CPC. One request was for, if memory serves, $340,000, $300,000 for housing related, and then $40,000 for related to the services that now CDP offers. And then the second one was, in last year's town meeting, we had asked for $540,000. So in total, we have $800,000 that we had asked for. So we asked for $300,000 and we asked for $500,000, and then the money for the services that we get through CDP. Is there any, we need to put together, the applications are due in by October 1st. So I'd like to have staff be able to prepare some of these applications and have them organized, so that way at the next meeting of the trust, we can actually formally vote them and have them submitted. Is there any pleasure of the board for what applications?
And we did provide you with the application that we did last year, so you can see what we did last year.
Thank you. Don?
Yeah, I'm just curious whether the other trust members feel. I mean, it seemed like we were heading towards Oak Street, just generically. Is that where we left the last meeting?
I think that's where
believe
we
so.
left it.
So
yes.
that should probably be the priority. Whatever funding we're asking for should head towards furtherance of that thing happening. Because we had talked about making sure that we could create a project to show some success in the community.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think we have a item on here for
Yeah.
prioritization. So I think this is in terms of annual request. So do we want to ask for 540? Do we want to ask for 340, or is there an alternate number that people want to ask?
I'd say 540.
540?
Yeah, because you said at the last meeting that they would tweak it if
They can always,
could.
they can always reduce it. That's correct. So 540?
So it's 30,000 for the consultant,
Yes.
and then
So, yeah, we'll make it 530 then. Is there consensus on that?
Yes.
So the first annual application will be for,
Vote, do we? No.
I don't think we do it by consensus if,
think that's
because it's
fine.
just preparation of the application, so. Okay, so I'll call it as consensus of the board to put in an application for 530 under the annual request. Now, I think the second part to this is the specific projects. So we have just one item listed on here, but I think we should have some discussion on the prioritization that we have. So in terms of, we did receive or had discussion at the last meeting about discussion regarding a joint application and prioritization of Deacon's Folly. The other one that, just under prioritization, we did have a presentation at the last meeting by Chris Wise that asked for participation relevant to his project, maybe in the form of moral support. I think he is here, so if he wanted to indicate that he wanted more than moral support, now would be the time, I think, to have that. But I think in terms of potential joint applications, the only two that I'm aware of, at least at this point, would be Deacon's Folly and potentially Chris Wise.
Just as a note, I mean, for this round on the CPC, we're looking at roughly 800 grand that would be devoted to housing, as far as I understand it.
You mean, so far, the only thing we authorized was 530?
I know, I'm just saying, if say somebody else came in for something,
Mhm.
you know, some other party, am I wrong that it's around 800?
I don't know the number.
For available funds available to us right now,
Yeah.
880.
Yeah, okay, well, that's kind of what I'm saying, is unless something were a little bit more mature, then yeah, I kind of like. I'm looking to protect our own interests and go for the 540 and get the 540 because we've got some very specific things we want to do. I'm not as eager on this round of the CPC to start muddying the waters and say, well, here's something that somebody's thinking of, and they would like 300,000. Because I was kind of hoping it would be anathema to what we were talking about too, because I was kind of hoping to use the trust as the gateway to affordable housing and not encourage the CPC to wind up thinking that they're going to reprioritize all the housing needs again, because that was, I went in front of them 6 months ago and said, now that the trust is up and running for housing, that's probably the mechanism where we pick who it is that gets into the lifeboat first. And we shouldn't be encouraging people to just run off and compete with the trust, you know, directly. So my own feelings are I would just rather stay with the 540 and,
In other words, you want to compete for housing projects, not with everybody else in town.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the balance could be rolled into the same bucket and kept until next year and build up for another worthy something or other.
Yeah, I do think, just from my perspective, that's fine if we do that. There just has to be an acknowledgement that if we ask for 530, then any projects that come in would have to be done within that 530, which means if there's a request for funding from Chris Wise, or if there's a request for funding from the parties, HCT and other parties related to Deacon's Folly, that it's within the 500. I'm fine with that. I thought what we had said to early on is that we would have an allocation to kind of drive everyone, so we would be the clearinghouse, if you would, for efforts. But if there was any project that came in larger than our ability to meet, then we would do a separate application, was kind of the thought process.
And that's what I was speaking to.
Yeah.
I know of no specific something or other at this juncture. We have looked at Deacon's Folly, we have looked at Oak Street, we have looked at Sisson Road. So those are further along. I mean, we're thinking about actually doing something with them, getting some designs ready, and anything that would be presupposing that there might be a project, because I'm not aware of anything that's more fleshed out. Is anybody here?
And is there enough time?
No, that's my point. It's like, I'd rather aggregate it for next year and say, okay, by the time next year rolls around, if it's a worthy project, we'll certainly support it. But why would we support something in concept without knowing any more particulars when we already have our own things that are further along than that? We may have things that are further along over the next 6 to 12 months ourselves that might require more money. So in a given year, they don't generate that, millions.
I think as long as there's an understanding that we would have to wait till next October to pursue any of those, that's all.
Because there's not literally enough time for you guys, for example, in planning to even process anything new at this point?
Well, I can put an
Yeah.
application together in a day, but,
Okay.
I'm, if I might, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'm a little confused on, are we, regarding the Deacon's Folly property, that was, as discussed, going to be a joint venture with the Real Estate and Open Space Committee to obtain that property. Half for conservation and open space and half for affordable housing. I think we would be remiss if we didn't try to move forward with that joint venture because it's a high, dry, no wetland issues, no natural heritage issues, whereas some other properties that we have some issues, quite frankly, with natural resource matters. So I would hate to see an opportunity go by where this property is available to not go forward on it. That's
And there was
just.
insufficient
Yeah.
funds available
Right.
to
Well,
us.
it's one of the three I mentioned. I do exactly agree with Charlene. That's known.
And
It's more fleshed out.
I believe
and
we are
need to
having
move.
an appraisal
Mhm,
done
mhm.
as well. So I just want to make sure we're not losing out on the possibility for the Deacon's Folly and that would be a joint application
Right.
with the Real Estate and Open Space Committee, to move forward on that.
So, is the question
Judith?
then, should we be asking for 8, if I'm understanding correctly?
You
For
could
you,
throw-
Mr.
go ahead.
Chairman, I think what we're looking at are actually two separate applications.
Mhm.
One is for the annual request, which is to cover the services for our housing coordinator, and the other is the money to help with other projects as they come about. The second application would be a joint application with the Real Estate and Open Space Committee, utilizing two funding pots to purchase the property at Deacon's Folly.
Right.
That's how I've understood it, and I just want to make sure that staff is understanding what
Yeah, I
you
believe
are
that
all
that's been the nature of the discussions that we've had so far. So I think if that was the case, then we would want to have two potential applications put together. One, we'd have to meet with Real Estate and Open Space and get a better strategy for how much and the
And I've
portion.
been attending their meetings now, so, and
So
Elaine and I talk.
Should we have a draft application done for our portion of that piece? It would make some sense, I think, to do.
More than likely, the draft applications, because Real Estate and Open Space Committee usually meets the Friday after this meeting, except for next month, which is a little off because of conflicts. But, a draft application for you and a draft application for them would be done within a week of each other for the Deacon's Folly. So, that's something that, staff will work on. This staff will work on the annual request, whereas I will work with Real Estate and Open Space, probably Elaine, the new chair, on the Deacon's Folly part of that.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Does.
So we'll put together basically two applications, I guess, but include the two concepts in the first one.
Right.
Okay. So by consensus, staff will put together two, and then we'll vote on that at the next meeting for the formal submission.
Mr. Chair, I'm only comfortable with the consensus if it gets into the minutes. If it doesn't, I'd be willing to make that we.
That's fine. You can make a motion to both if you want
Yeah,
to.
we do
I'd second
pursue
that.
both of them.
So Don makes the motion,
Wanted to
Larry
be here
seconds.
somewhere.
To pursue both.
Yeah.
Pursue
Pursue
both.
both in the applications.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you. Update on the Affordable Housing Trust land inventory.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, I was gonna have you show.
Today we're looking at the two primary properties, 1A and 1B. 1A being Oak Street. And certainly interject if I get this wrong with what Laura has presented back to us, Laura Schufelt with Mass Housing Partnership. There are some environmental constraints on the two parcels on Oak Street. Does not mean that they're impossible, but the likelihood of multifamily on this these two parcels is unlikely. I'm trying to make this as big as I can without making it muddy. There we go. So there is a vernal pool on the property. Setbacks from a vernal pool are 50 feet. In addition, that's a state and local regulation. In addition, there's a local regulation that there's an additional 10 feet of a no-build zone under the local wetlands bylaw through our conservation. So then there's also a 100-foot buffer. Things can go, meaning septic systems and dwellings can go within that 100-foot buffer. We do like to have septic outside the 100-foot buffer, if possible. That's a zoom in. And so, again, we have the vernal pool, we have the 50-foot no disturb, we have the additional 60-foot buffer, which is 50s added as part of that, and then the 100-foot buffer. And then, if I can get, oh my gosh, where did it go? So what I've shown here is the hatched, is the hatched area. That is a potential area for, that's the approximate 60-foot setback and the rest of the land area available. So that's an approximate area of what could be developed for both septic and for structures. Okay. At this point, in talking with staff, we've kind of come to the recommendation that the land may only be suitable for one single-family dwelling. We have been told by Mass Housing Partnership that they are not so inclined to pursue this for multifamily because they just don't see it happening because of the environmental constraints on the property. Additional engineering would be advisable to determine the available area for septic and dwelling. And the trust may wish to consider, once that work is done, an RFP for the development of an affordable single-family dwelling. This may be something Habitat might be interested in or some other entity out there. I do believe, based on the work that was going to be done by Mass Housing Partnership to go the next step with engineering work, they estimated approximately $10,000 additional. I'm not anticipating it would be quite that much, but somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 to do some additional engineering work to determine where and if something can go here.
Larry?
Mr. Chairman, it would seem to me, and this is my opinion, that given the fact the town is looking to create an average of 20 units a year to just catch up with ourselves, that wasting the time and money and effort on one dwelling unit is just not cost effective. It's going to cost more money. We're going to put a lot of time and effort into a challenging site. Shouldn't be bothered with it as far as I'm concerned. You know, if somebody else wants to do it, fine and dandy, but don't waste our money and time on it.
That's what I was just going to ask. Do you think it's possible as a one-off that Habitat might be interested if the land were given aside to it? And then we wouldn't be developing it, we wouldn't be spending any of the money.
Correct.
So we're not prepared to very specifically answer it. However, we would, with a referral from this body, look at it outside this meeting, and then we could see if it seemed feasible to us to come to a future meeting. If we saw it was feasible for us to develop with then a specific proposal for some request for funds, if we thought we would develop it, and then we would be using our time in the early stage to decide if it were feasible for one house and it was something we wanted to develop. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I can't stand here today.
Because I think the concept of putting an RFP out, if it's going to cost us $5,000 to $10,000 to do some preliminary, then is it worth $5,000 or $10,000?
And the time.
Then the time to do the RFP, to send it out and see if there is any interested parties.
Otherwise,
I mean, we could give you a statement of preliminary interest with a little time, and then, is this town-owned land now?
It is
Oh, so you would
town-owned.
have to put out an RFP. So you would know if you would have at least one respondent. We could let you know if you would have at least one respondent, and then, of course, we would understand it would be competitive if you put it out.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So, just before you go too far, how long do you think it would be for an assessment? I mean, are we talking about a month, or should we wait for the next meeting, or? can we kind of make a motion to kind of move along here and do the assessment? And
I'm Beth Wade. I'm Land Acquisition and Permitting Manager for Habitat for Humanity, and I would say I could probably have some sort of an assessment of the property within 6 to 8 weeks.
So October.
Thank you. And I know we put you on the spot, so I'm not gonna, I don't think we should hold you to any of that.
Why doesn't the chair put it on the agenda and with the understanding that we have some interest in it to the extent that it's not high leverage, to us?
I'm with you. I actually was gonna say, do we wanna just move forward and do the assessment and then put an RFP out and try to,
Not unless we know somebody's
I
actually
don't,
interested.
I don't think so. I mean, the amount of effort you're gonna put, you might as well do the same amount of effort for 10 or 12 units as opposed to one. If we're
Okay.
looking for a win, let's look for a win.
If there is an inkling by the next meeting or two, then it might make sense without spending a
Yeah,
whole lot of
if-
time on it.
Go ahead, Charlene.
If I might just make a recommendation, if Habitat has, you know, indicated that they're willing to do an assessment, and if they can do it, put this back on the agenda in October, which is 6 to 8 months away, if it's something that they're able to do or not able to do, then move then. To me, 1 weeks. You know, one house is better than no houses.
Right. And if it's $10,000 for one house, I mean, that to me seems like something to actually pursue. I get it doesn't create the splash that we're
Right.
looking for,
It
but
doesn't, but, I mean, if
It's
it's
a
an
family in a
opportunity
place.
to get one.
I'm just a little concerned that from a procurement standpoint, you know, we don't want to have collusion, that we're intentionally only doing it because we want to benefit
You
benefit
still have to put the RFP
Habitat.
out, though.
Yeah,
after
I think they do want you to see if there's an interest out there, so I think under that, that probably does make sense to, so why don't we put it on for the October agenda?
To the collusion point, there's literally zero collusion possible with this because what's the alternative? We're gonna sit on it as open space? We didn't acquire it for open space. So we need to be able to at least pursue it. And they're right, we would have to be legally obligated to put an RFP out, but at least if we get to that point in October and we see there might be some, then we'll see where we go. I mean, but we can't sit on it
Definitely.
indefinitely and say, what a nice looking vernal pool.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not why we acquired the land.
Right. Okay, so we'll put it on for the October meeting and see if there is a level of interest for people to bid on it. Do you want to have a motion to that effect too?
I would move that we advance this, table this item until the October meeting of the trust, to be brought up again on the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? 1B, Charlene, do you want to?
Sisson Road, so we were able, thank you, Art, to find copies of the proposal that was done back in 2008 for the Sisson Road property, 265 Sisson Road. This is a conceptual elevation, that's all it is a concept. I'll do this and then you can do your Laura part, how's that?
Do I have a lower part?
Just that they're willing to move forward if.
Sure.
Yeah. So here is oh, that came out terrible. Here is a conceptual plan. You have it in your packets. I wish this came out a little bit better. Because it's a PDF, I can't do much with it. Basically, it has what we believe are actually 16 units, 8 in each building, which front directly on Sisson Road with parking out back. We do have floor plans. Those are a little easier to see. So, oh, sorry about that. So there are 4 units on the first floor and then 4 units on the second floor in this concept. And again, this is just a concept. This is just an idea that was looked at back in 2008 for a potential idea for the property.
And were those
ahead.
1 or 2 bedrooms, just for those at home that can't see it?
These are a mix, or
It's a mix,
let's see. That's ground one-bedroom, that's a one-bedroom.
Sorry.
This has a mind of its own, sorry.
I think it was a mix.
So it'd be 16 units in total, two
Think, wait a
two
minute, I'm trying-
eighplexes?
yeah,
Yeah, it's
I have a gremlin in my computer, so that's ground floor
Well,
and
you're giving
that's
it to my
second
computer,
floor.
too.
So actually, it may only be 12 units. It looks like these might be multi-bedroom, but it's hard, I can't really tell. It looks like they may all be one-bedroom, but that doesn't mean there can't be a configuration of, you know, a couple one-bedrooms, a couple two-bedrooms, that kind of thing. Again, this was just a conceptual plan that was done at the time.
Yeah, I think as we progress, some of those financing requirements will be two-bedroom, one-bedroom, some of that will
Exactly.
come out of that.
Exactly.
And do we have a report or any information from Laura Schufelt in terms of the viability of this?
I find
So
that-
Laura is waiting for direction from the trust about whether or not to move forward with Sisson Road. So as Charlene said, MHP is not willing to move forward with Oak Street because it's not multifamily. But she is prepared to move forward with Sisson Road. She just needs to go ahead from us. And again, these conceptual plans are only to show that there has been some preliminary work done on the site. So we could expect that perhaps a little bit less pre-development might be necessary for the site. And this also shows what the number of units the site might hold, but does not at all indicate what the design would be or what the ultimate unit number would be or unit mix.
Because the last instruction this board gave was for the Oak Street, so we do need to officially move to 1B. Don?
Yeah, I actually wanted to underscore what Andrea said. Just so everybody knows, if you look at the annotations on the plans, this was the hack plan. Hack, I love Jerry, but I'm not necessarily going to agree with his characterization of how he got from here to there, but there were two plans. Hack submitted one. After that, Hesh submitted another, which were for colonial-looking. There's a number of things that could happen there. I just haven't been able to lay my hands on the
Yeah, this-
second set of plans.
This is the only one we've been able to find.
So, this is a plan, there is another plan, and it might be yet another one that we wind up pursuing, but, the Hesh plan was more colonial, and it was 4 quads rather than 2 buildings. So, there's a number of different things that could happen here.
Okay. Is there,
But in both plans, I believe they were trying to be sensitive to the local homeowners, that it wasn't going to wind up being inferred into the community as some vast something or other. It was supposed to be compatible with what we're doing, and if that's what we're still planning on doing, I'd be wholeheartedly supporting it.
This is located in the historic district, so
Yeah.
even though the historic district is a local entity under 40B, you know, you can waive that, but I think you would want to be sensitive to the surrounding architectural theme and character of the neighborhood.
and obviously MHP would understand that, and any of their preliminary work would include that as a part of their thought process.
Yeah, of course.
I move we make this
Are
Plan
there any other,
1A.
was there any comments? I thought, were you getting up to speak? Just
Mr.
before you
Chair,
make a motion, it seemed that there was
Art
some
Bowden,
comment.
Housing Committee. Now, that we started the race out with 2 horses in the race, and one has been sidelined. And just a suggestion, I don't want anyone to get too nervous here, we ought to bring another horse out of the stable and put him on the list to start looking at. So we should always have,
You jumped ahead on the agenda.
well, what's the next one on the list?
That's what
The
they're going
next
to
part
talk
of the
about.
agenda.
That's what you're going to talk about? Good, okay. Well, I'll just make sure everyone's awake up here. Thank you.
I appreciate the thought. Okay, so
Yeah,
you're about to make a
I move
motion,
to
Don?
make this property 1A and replacing Oak Street.
That's by consensus.
Yeah, let's not do by consensus, since I'm not hearing that that's something that's,
I'll second Don's motion then.
thank you. Okay, all in favor of moving Sisson Road to 1A and ask MHP to pursue the development of that site?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
But everybody should understand exactly what Charlene said. This is a process. We could move it to 1A, but it's got to be somewhat compatible. It's going to go out, ultimately, MHP is going to put something forward. It's going to get hearings. It's not going to be like, we just voted to move this up to 1, and it's going to be built. So-
If I might, just
Go
very
ahead,
briefly, as
Charlie.
it was explained by Laura Schufelt at a previous meeting, and Andrea's brought it up numerous times, you can't tell a designer or, a developer how to do it. But you can certainly say it needs to be in keeping with the architectural
Character of the neighborhood.
neighborhood and, that kind of thing. So,
And it still goes
that
through
would be
boards.
very much in there.
And it still goes through boards. The public will see it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so did we want to bring up, or we're on the agenda for Art's comment on the, I guess, the two, the second one. Do we want to discuss that here, or do we want to, is there another spot where we had the,
Oh, oops.
because I thought the Board of Selectmen did ask, or a member of the Board of Selectmen had asked, relevant to kind of assigning some prioritization to what the trust was looking for. I think that was in terms of other specific items that people were giving some consideration to. And, in terms of prioritization,
This is completely my error. That was on the agenda, and now it fell off. I don't know what happened. Somehow, it was on there, and somehow when I did this, it fell off.
well, why don't we
Completely my error, not
Why don't we
anybody
put that
else's.
on for the
Yeah.
next meeting, and then maybe staff can put together, and I'm happy to work with staff in terms of at least putting some concepts in and some kind of level of the items that we want to have discussed, and then let the board determine the priority that we want to pursue.
That's fine.
So since that's not on the agenda, we'll just have to put that on for
And
the
that's
September
totally on
12th.
me. It was there, and somehow I was having major computer issues last week.
I appreciate, we all live busy lives, so no one can be perfect.
Apologies.
Discussion and vote on the renewal of Year 2 Housing Coordinator contract with Community Development Partnership, just presentation by myself. In terms of, we had it on a discussion at the last meeting, we did include in the packet this time the actual contract. Question came up on Monday night in regards to, at the Selectmen's meeting, in regards to, is it possible to have the second year be awarded by the trust after the original RFP was done through the Selectmen? I happened to be at a training just really by coincidence at the Attorney General was holding on Tuesday, so I did have an opportunity to speak to someone in their procurement unit at the Attorney General's office, kind of laid out, and I said, do you see any concern? They said no, that the trust could award this contract. And then I followed up with Attorney Giorgio and asked him, and I did include the write-up that Attorney Giorgio had. I would strongly say, though, that I think we should do the contract and just do Year 2, but that we probably want to consider going back out for the next several years to try to make sure that we line up a consultant moving forward. So that's the request that's before us. Don?
As I said, I spent 20 minutes on the phone with John Giorgio before I came here. Without getting deeply involved with impugning anybody's reputation, you can only get a verbal opinion from a lawyer based on the verbal facts you're conveying, and if you leave anything out, it could radically change the outcome. The contract starts with the following provisions shall constitute the agreement between the town of Harwich, acting by and through the Board of Selectmen, hereinafter referred to as the town, and the Lower Cape Community Development Corporation. While Mr. Clark is the chief procurement officer of the town, his delegated authority wasn't for the value of this contract. The Board of Selectmen signed this thing. And I'm not trying to be obstructionist and say that it shouldn't get renewed. I mean, but first of all, it shouldn't have gotten to the point of expiring, and 6 weeks later you start thinking about renewing it. But second of all, I mean, I'd be willing to make a motion that we refer this to the Board of Selectmen with a recommendation that they execute the second year of the contract. The trust was not in existence when this thing was formed. The trust wasn't an entity at all. And while the same parties, you and I particularly, might have been involved in the contract, we were occupying wholly different roles. This organization, while it has contracting authority, never issued an RFP for anything relating to this. Again, when I explained this all to John, I said my move is going to be to refer it to the Board of Selectmen to have them renew it, and it could be put on the next agenda.
And that leaves us with enough time to
Well, we're
continue
already
I'm
paying.
concerned that we already have them engaged and working.
And we've allowed them to continue to incur liabilities, and he said that oftentimes that does occur because of the vagaries of having to do, getting a contract signed in an organization. So I'm not suggesting we don't do it, but we're already past the expiration, and it would seem to me that if the people who entered into this contract were the Board of Selectmen and the CDP, that those are the two parties that should actually execute any renewal for the contract. We should recommend that it get renewed, but that doesn't mean that they shut down what they do. They've already been doing stuff for 6 weeks that we owe money for and that we should be paying. But that's on us, that it took us 6 weeks to recognize that this darn thing expired. So
I think
don't-
I would, okay.
Want me
It's
to make
10
that
days.
motion so it won't be you two?
Well, I was gonna suggest, I mean, we do have a formal legal opinion, maybe just a little of an inverse of that I
Okay.
think we should vote it and then ask for a confirmation vote from the Board of Selectmen, so that way the Selectmen have a formal vote from us that we want to continue it for a year.
Can I jump in and say something, please?
Go ahead, Judith.
I would prefer what Don had said, primarily because the language in the letter from Giorgio articulated you as chair of this committee bringing forth that question, not the Board of Selectmen bringing forth that question. And that's you as town administrator bringing the question to him from the Board of Selectmen is how it should have been articulated. So let's keep this nice and clean. Let's get these guys paid. Let's push it back to the Board of Selectmen to renew this. And then going forward, we will take on that responsibility as a trust. That would be my preference. And just keep this nice, neat up front, so there's no questions anywhere.
And I made a motion to refer it to the Board of Selectmen with our recommendation to approve it.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so your motion was to send to the Board of Selectmen
Board of Selectmen to
without
execute the-
recommendation?
No, it's with a recommendation to execute renewal.
Judith seconded. It's a valid motion on the floor. Any discussion, additional discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'll be opposed, 4-1. I think that as a trust, we need to act as a independent entity, so I don't see the same issue as Don does. Okay, item F, overview and discussion of the housing production plan. Charlene?
I'm talking too much. I did provide for you the executive summary of the housing plan. The whole plan is available on the town website. I'm not gonna go into all the aspects of this unless people have specific questions. What I did wanna go to was the summary of housing strategies and kind of give you an update of where we are since this plan was done. This was approved in December of 16. Conduct ongoing community education. That is continuing. That has happened almost immediately through the workshops and programs offered through the CDP and other entities. That has continued. We have hired a part-time housing coordinator. With regard to zoning strategies, the first item is integrate affordable housing in the cluster developments. That has not happened. Cluster developments have not been a very much used tool here in Harwich as of late. Adopt inclusionary zoning is another item. That's something that we have not begun discussions on, but it may be something we want to do. Promote affordable housing and mixed-use developments. We are continuing to do that through our, in several of our commercial zones, we do allow for mixed-use development, where only 33% has to be commercial, and the remainder can be apartments. We have seen a number of those created, which is a good thing. We did modify our accessory apartment bylaw. It is now by right, yay. We update the local LIP regulations and procedures. That we have not done yet. And adopt a hotel conversion bylaw. That's something that I think needs some more discussion. The nice thing about the housing production plan is it's a moving, growing document. As different ideas and thoughts come forward, different zoning ideas can come out of them. Housing production strategies continue to make suitable public land available for affordable housing. I think we did that at this last town meeting by bringing the number of properties forward. That did get transferred to the trust. Continue to partner with private developers. I think the conversations that are being had are good to find out what other entities are looking at. Chris Wise's development is a great conversation. Convert existing housing to affordability. We've not done that yet. That's still something that we can look at. There is some discussion of a local building that may be converting to apartments. More to come on that. There's nothing formal yet. Has nothing to do with this committee. Totally on planning. So, and it's not affordable housing, but it's still a potential for apartments. Housing preservation and assistance strategies. Monitor subsidized housing inventory. That's something that the housing coordinator is doing. And help qualify residents access housing assistance. That's something that we are also providing at the staff level and directing people to the right entities. So unless somebody has specific questions, we are moving forward on a number of these items, and this is a growing document. You may be seeing some more conversation from the planning board on different ideas for promoting different types of housing. But I have not had those conversations yet with the planning board because other things keep popping up, but it will be on the horizon.
Just, I guess the only question I have is, are there any priority items, like recognizing that, it seems hard to believe we're in August, but that the calendar for the town meeting will be, developed shortly. Is there anything that we need to, have as a higher priority for deliberation, so we make sure we make town meeting in time?
Right.
Or should we finish the action plan first and then do the item second?
I think there are some items, and I'm not talking out of turn here. We have an existing zoning bylaw for multifamily allowable in certain zoning districts. In one of the districts, you need 8 acres. In another, you need 25 acres. Wow, that's crazy, with all due respect. When it was written, there was probably a mindset behind that. And the restriction on the number of bedrooms per acre is more restrictive than Title V. So I think that those bylaws really need to be looked at and need to be really brought up to the 21st century. So that is something that I am going to be discussing with the planning board probably in September, the latter part of September or early October. If there are other ideas that people have, individual, if you have ideas that you think might work for zoning, let me know. I can kind of run with them and work on them. I don't care who the ideas are from. Any concepts or thoughts that people have, I'm very curious to hear. And if we can move forward with them, I think that's great.
I think having a former chair of the planning board may have some input in terms of some of those ideas. So.
Larry always has great
Agreed.
ideas.
Okay, I just wanted to at least, thank you for that.
Can I just
Don?
ask a question? Generally, these zones kind of somewhat equate to the villages. I know that they're not listed that way, but where is it that?
Ironically, these aren't, which
Really?
is, yeah. It's the MRL, I may have that backwards, it may be MRL. The M stands for multi-low-density residential.
Where's the low impact density?
Right now, it's like, well, where Belmont is, where Witchmere is. So right now, it's really high-end stuff, but it certainly could.
So you could build high-end stuff in multiple units, but not just regular stuff.
Exactly, and that's where we need to look at it differently, and also think outside of, where it's allowable only now with special permits, and look at some of the other zoning districts to see, do these areas lend themselves for multifamily? because I think some areas really do. That's where some of the land is available to develop some of these. And I had conversations with people who go, you know, I'd really love to do a mixed-use development here of single-family cluster dwellings, but also apartments. And right now, you can't do that unless you want to do a 40B, which is not a bad thing because we create affordable housing. But we also need that market rate housing for those who don't qualify for affordable housing. You know, we need housing for all, so.
That's kind of why I asked. I just was curious about what parts of town that was.
Thank you. We have discussion and possible vote on Habitat for Humanity resale opportunity. So maybe, Vicki, if you could join us and just, where we are kind of new, maybe walk us through what's transpiring and what role potentially Habitat has to play and what role we would potentially play on this.
Is it all right? Yeah.
Yep, you're fine.
So, Beth, why don't you just join me for the heck of it? So, this is a unit that was built, it's on Gomes Way, two-bedroom home. It's part of, some of the homes there are single-family and some were built in a two-family style. This is part of a two-family. And it happened during a brief, usually the deed riders that govern, at least that Habitat's been in, that govern resales, the three parties are initially are Habitat, the town, and the Department of Housing and Community Development, because DHCD is the subsidizing agency that gives permission to go forward with a 40B, et cetera. There's other subsidizing agents, certain federal funding that are allowed to take that role of subsidizing agency with tax credits, et cetera. There was a brief period in history where the county home, which is a grant source because the funds come from the federal government, was considered a subsidizing agency through the Cape Cod Commission. That lasted about 2 years, of which Gomes Way was part of it. And then the state ruled that home could only be a subsidizing agency if it was coming through state home funds. I'm only mentioning this because it's very unusual to see the county in the place of the state. The other thing is you should know that formally named in the deed rider is Habitat, the town of Harwich through the Board of Selectmen and the Cape Cod Commission. So the formal notice went to the Board of Selectmen and it went to the Cape Cod Commission and it went to Habitat. So when I got informal notice, this is a long preface, when I got informal notice from the current owner that she wished to sell, when it's usually helpful for people to start gathering information right at the beginning. So as we're talking about hats today, I notified Chris in his capacity as town administrator to the Board of Selectmen. I knew that the town had a housing specialist, and I notified Pelinda, and then I also notified the person who had been designated previously to me from the county that would be handling such things, and also her boss, who would have been the formal. So now we've been formally notified by Dawn Granquist, the owner of 6 Gomes Way, that she wishes to sell. There's a deed rider that Chris and Pelinda, and it's a public record at any rate, and I don't know what the committee
I did send it out
has,
to
so
committee.
I
everybody's
think
seen
we
it.
forwarded it
Yeah.
on.
Right, that successively gives our 3 entities, Habitat, the town of Harwich, and then Cape Cod Commission, County, the right to either purchase the home directly and then resell it, and it still must be sold to a household at or below 80% of median income, and it must be sold within the maximum resale price. And that's the same whether the current owner sells it or any of us purchase it and resell it or assist her to sell it. I guess I've established, and I think it's the role of Cape Cod Commission to affirm this, that the maximum resale would now be $123,255. So for a 2-bedroom, it's well within what DHCD allows. This particular deed rider says that any advertising, broker, et cetera, would probably come out of the maximum resale price. In my experience with DHCD, with these old ones, usually they allow a fee on top of it, or they'll adjust the maximum so that that doesn't come out of the seller's pocket. So that's an issue to make you aware of. And what I would say is generally Habitat does not like to purchase and resale or assist. We pass that along. The county on the other side has said they will not be. So it's really something for, honestly, the Board of Selectmen, through my understanding, but I don't want to advise this committee. But as stated in the deed rider for the town formally, of course, the trust didn't even exist at that time, for the town to formally, within 30 days of getting Habitat's notice, to let all the other parties, including the current owner, know if the town wishes to purchase it and then resell it to a qualified owner under a, purchaser under a fair marketing practice, or assist the current owner in doing that, or pass that along to the county. The grantee has a responsibility, regardless of assistance, to try to locate an eligible buyer. And in fact, I've just noticed that I should be letting her know she can begin that process now. She doesn't have to wait for all of us. The only other thing I'd say about my experience is that when we have assisted, we've usually done that in the form of bringing Gail Kelleher, who's a sort of a broker specializing in this with Housing Assistance Corporation, who's done it for many years, and she knows how to connect the pieces between the public entities, the banks that will do first-time homebuyer mortgages. There has to be an eligibility certificate at the end. She's worked with the different closing attorneys, so she's worked very effectively as the specialist who kind of brings it all together, and Housing Assistance generally has a ready-to-buy list, et cetera. I don't know what capabilities Lower Cape CDP has or may be developing in the future. So if someone else were to handle it, they might handle it a different way. I guess one other thing I wanted to say is I think one thing that's very important is that there be a good functional communication between county, town, and Habitat, and that we each have a designated person that can say, they can communicate informally to all within the parameters of what's allowable to get this sold, so this homeowner can move on and someone else gets this wonderful opportunity.
So if I kind of follow you, in terms of the position, Habitat has the first position, and then if Habitat chooses not to, then it would defer to the selectmen as the second position?
That's
and the
correct.
county as the third?
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
And then has the owner reached out to you to work with Habitat to do the lottery, or do you anticipate that you would formally say to the selectmen that it's on them to
I think we
pursue?
would formally decline. We feel that our sweet spot is as a developer of affordable homeownership opportunities, a builder, and working with the first generation of purchaser in homebuyer education, et cetera. So this additional administrative, and it's also not under the Habitat process once we do this. It's someone at 80%, they're going to be working with a conventional bank, et cetera. And again, usually if you work with an entity that, if the county accepts HAC's ready-to-buy list, et cetera, in lieu of the usual marketing, and it still gives the opportunity for people they always advertise that people can put in applications and so forth. So, but yeah, I don't know, did I answer that question? I kind of wandered.
Yeah, no, I think you did. So if
So
I'm...
we will duck. We will duck, yes. We'll pass it
So you're
along.
going to duck, the county's indicated that they're
Yeah,
going to duck, so it's up to the selectmen to decide if they want to defer to us, and we have 30 days to, or the selectmen have 30 days in which to enact the option or not? Is that what?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
And
And
have you formally, in your email or in correspondence, said that Habitat is not going to pursue, so that way we can
I
sketch?
think
it
we
needs
say
to go
that
on the
we
Board of
generally
Selectmen.
do, and then I happen to be scanning past board minutes for a different reason, and I found that we had established a policy that we do not exercise the right to purchase and resale.
Yeah, they do say we would likely decline our option.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Dawn?
Well, you can answer it here, you can answer it later.
Yeah, sure.
Because I gotta be in both places. So my question really is, if memory serves, or not was awarded and broke ground and got built, I don't recall the photovoltaic cells being on the roofs of any of those things originally. So when you're talking about capital improvements that might have been made, I mean, that's a pretty substantial one overall. I'm not sure which direction we want to go in, but I mean, you want to have even a slightest discussion about the fork in the road, whether you want to talk about cap improvements and then what the affordable housing price would be as compared to just a flat out.
Right. So, the solar panels were part of the original construction. Habitat had them 100% funded by outside grant sources. And our process has been, we have always targeted our pricing to be affordable to certain, certain income target groups. And so that wouldn't be considered a capital improvement. I know
So
what
it's
clause you're
implicit in the
talking about
base
because it was
price.
part of the original, construction. Certainly, sometimes there have been adjustments in the resale price for someone at or above. This was originally sold to a household at or below 60%, 80%, and there's reasons for price adjustments. If there's, whoever takes responsibility, whether she's selling directly, the broker's going to advise her, or if the town gets involved to see what kind of condition the unit's in, et cetera. Sometimes there's been reasons why the price has been adjusted, still well within an affordable price because of certain costs involved, and that's been under DHCD in the past. In this instance, it would be Cape Cod Commission that would need to look at it if, I don't know. I haven't seen the condition of the unit or anything like that.
But the owner in their discussions with you has just kind of indicated that the 123 is the number and there's no
Oh, they-
substantial capital improvements that have been made to it?
She hasn't made a case
Either way.
for anything, and in fact, I only told her that by my informal computation, I mean, I did good math, but I said, I'm not the regulation here. By my informal, this would be the maximum. The maximum is not guaranteed, it's a maximum. Whoever's going to assist in selling, or when a broker gets involved, they'll need to look at the condition, et cetera, so it's not a guaranteed price, but.
And then just for, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Larry.
I've done a couple of these before,
Oh, good.
and generally, let's pick a date back in the past 15 or 20 years ago. And from that date on, first you have the base number to work with. Every 5 years, the price is adjusted for the average of the CPI over the preceding 5. So, and there's a very strict formula that's used for it. So it's done every 5 years, so at the end of 15 or 20 years, there's a number there. And there is a City of Boston does this. There is a very specific way that they do it. Any capital improvements are added in if they in fact fall within the right guidelines. So then at the end of the period of time, you have a number, 123 or.
So excuse me, it's a similar but slightly different methodology that is embedded right in the deed rider.
Okay.
So there's a multiplier factor in there based upon median income. You look at, it was the original house price over median income at that time became the multiplier factor. So looked at what median income is in 2019, multiplied it by the multiplier factor. That's where I got the 1 point. So it brings it up in that same kind of way.
It's effectively the same method.
Yeah,
So
that's how it is.
And then what they do with that is, that number is usually relatively easy once you work it out. The number becomes that number. Then the difficult part is, when you advertise and see how many people actually apply for it, it's absolutely stunning. And then you've got to find the people that will qualify. So it becomes either the owner sells it, and if they fall under the right guidelines, or the owner and a buyer sell it. I mean, the owner and an agent. So if the agent does that, a lot of that falls on their shoulders. And really, it has to be so transparent. You stand up there and make sure that you pick out number 73 out of the drum, or whatever the case might be. And then you get qualified buyers, and you've got to qualify them,
Right.
It doesn't work with the top 5.
Yeah, usually never pan out.
They never pan out. I mean, I can remember one project we did, and the 73rd person manage to make it into the, actually getting the unit, and I think they'll die in that unit too.
So-
So there's a very strict thing, and I think the important part is just advertise it. Now, does the town want to get into it, you know? Or does the agent want to get into it? It's a pretty complex process.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question. So if the town, if the Board of Selectmen get presented this and they opt to not pursue, then what transpires?
Well, I would think if the town, the commission, and Habitat were all willing to accept, and if the county found legitimate to accept the same process that DHCD has accepted, DHCD has accepted a process that's evolved through Housing Assistance Corporation, where they're always pre-qualifying purchasers, where they do some advertising that gives, that gives the opportunity for more purchasers to apply, and then I guess depending on the response, they either, they either have a lottery or it's evident that there's only one qualified. I would say there's less of a response on a resale generally than there are on new construction.
And there's actually a company that does that too,
Well,
does that work.
the resales.
Specialize in the
So that's
resale.
what I'm saying, on Cape Cod, Housing Assistance Corporation has a long history with it through this one broker, Gail Kelleher. I don't know what the succession planning is there, and whether, if she has someone coming up behind her, or if CDP is gonna get into it or something, but they've been willing to do it, and it's generally gone smoothly up to this point, but it's all within, I think we'd have to probably agree that that was considered legitimate under this.
And
And really, I think the county was the original subsidizing agency.
I think what you really have to think about, and the Board of Selectmen, do you want to get into this? This is a lot of work for one unit. Let somebody else do it. They've done it before. You don't have to start again. Charlene would be delighted to go through 70 applications and
Yeah.
see if they're qualified.
Can I just ask you, maybe you can't answer it, but since it's 10 years old, it was 10 years old when these were built, with the solar, it's about time that a new inverter would be put in, and sometimes those run a few $1,000s. And in this, a few $1,000s in this price range is quite a lot of money.
Right.
Do you remember if in the grant there was any buffering for that sort of thing?
I don't think there is, and so that's the kind of thing that maybe if it's Gail or if it's the town opts for it, someone would do a walkthrough and they would say, she's kept it up, but for someone else to step into it, ready to live in at this income that's only gonna be affordable,
Right.
we would advise, increasing the price by blah, blah, and getting that work done in advance, or escrowing the funds out of the sales price, so that work could be done before a buyer. So that's a little bit when someone moves into the role to assist, or if Gail as broker is advising us for the three entities to say, yeah, we have no objection to that, or the county to say we have no objection. So, those are the kinds of things that come up. That's good.
Yeah, in terms of, I'm thinking about, in terms of time frame. So the next Board of Selectmen's meeting is the 26th of August, so we would probably put it on for that board meeting, and then the board would vote to decide. I mean, I would think one option that they could have is to send it back to us if we wanted to pursue that. I don't know if there's, an interest in us
It's
to.
Larry's one-house scenario.
Is this one where we would send a recommendation?
Do it for 20, but don't do it for one.
I just have a clarification in my own mind. So if all three entities say we're not interested in purchasing it, do all three entities have to agree on how it will be resold?
Well,
And is the current owner obligated to do that?
yeah, there's language in there about how she would have to advertise, et cetera, and then I think on the, did you
I don't have
comb
it
through
either.
this in advance? I suspect in this one, what happens is if no qualified purchaser is found, which seems highly unlikely, it can get sold for, you know what, I don't want to speak without looking at it. It says what happens, it reimposes the deed riders, but I think it would probably say I think we need to look at that language, actually. I don't want to punt.
And can I
but it's
ask,
covered in here.
Judith?
and my guess is, with all due respect to your experience, a unit like this, there probably is going to be possibly at least 10 different parties that
At
may
least-
already be,
at
at
least
least,
10?
right? So, my question is, and it kind of follows yours, and I guess we need to just figure it out, is if none of the three entities take it on to administrate this, does that require, I guess, I mean, ideally, we would like it to be a lottery, I would think, right, a random of qualified people, rather than having the owner make the option of who would get the unit.
I mean, the hybrid would be for someone designated by you to have a conversation, for example, with Gail Kelleher in advance of the Board of Selectmen's meeting, see about her willingness to, if the town opted to assist in the
That's a good-
purchase,
good point.
to see if she was willing to take on that role and to, take the advertised applications and have a,
Then the only cost to
Yes.
the town or to the
Well,
trust would be the...
I think, again, a conversation with county and Habitat, if you were, I believe, I can't speak for the county, it would be a reasonable answer if the county, it would be reasonable if the county were asked, can we adjust the maximum price by 3% or 2% or whatever it is to allow for the broker fee, et cetera, to, is there an objection to that?
Go ahead, Charlene, and then
Just to
Donna.
follow, only because I'm actually a member at large on the home consortium.
Okay.
So, would this be going to the home consortium for them to make that decision, or would it be going to the Cape Cod Commission? Because home used to be under the commission, now it's under the county,
I understand it's under Beth Albert now.
which
Is she
is
still
county,
there with the
human
county?
services.
That it's been
Okay, then
moved
it's under
to
human
there.
services
Yeah.
entity of the county.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Donna?
I'm riffing on everybody here because that's, just looking at this as a reasonable prospect. You go down through the first priorities and then it falls, I mean, to the extent that it starts falling on the individual homeowner somehow, even with a realtor. I mean, I used to have a real estate sales license. I gotta tell you, a lot of real estate people didn't even wanna get involved with foreclosures because they were too complicated. This is complicated,
Yes, it is.
and what I'm thinking is, forgive me for saying this, but somebody who's living in one of those houses, you wouldn't put somebody who lived in a $750,000 home who had the ability to hire a lawyer in that kind of a position because it's daunting. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in this thing. There's a lot of variables, there's the deed writer, what's the actual price, and I agree, once you start talking to, about thousands of dollars on a house that's only valued out at 123, you're actually talking about a capital improvement if it lasts 10 years. So somebody's facing the replacement of parts of the, the photovoltaic cells. I would want to be in that position, and I would hire a lawyer, and I'd hire a realtor. So, I mean, I think this is a lot more complicated than, I'm afraid that once it gets past these entities, the county, the town, and everybody, then the wherewithal factor starts getting smaller.
So where are we going with this? Do we want to, I mean, I guess we could reach out to Gail Kelleher, see what the scope and the nature of a project of this type would be, and then,
I'd like to see what happens after it gets past number 3. When it drops down below that, what does that look like to an actual person in a house?
I thought I was hearing from you that, do we want to have the homeowner be responsible for doing something that's fairly complicated real estate transaction?
Yeah, that's why I'm saying,
Or do
I'd
we
like to know
want
what
to-
4 looks like. What are those options? What can 4 be that's minimally invasive to the person who's living in a house?
I think the question is, do we want to try to help, or do we want to leave it to
Punt.
do we want to punt, yeah, for lack of a better term?
Could we reach out to Ms. Kelleher and get an assessment from her, and then we can put this in the agenda to discuss it, to whether or not to make a recommendation to the Board of Select?
Well, I understood it was
I
gonna
don't
be
know
on
if
in
the
a couple
30
of weeks.
days,
Is it?
Oh,
I think we
We
just
don't
got
have
this last week.
Well, I got this on
got this
the,
Tuesday,
I was thinking we were gonna
yesterday.
adjourn.
the formal notice was the 7th,
Well, then we need some
so,
backup
And you
data.
sent it on
She sent it on the 7th, and we received it on the 9th, the formal notice.
Oh.
Formal notice, I think it's the date she mails, so if it's dated,
So August 9th.
or it might be August 7th, the date that she sent. I have to look
And
at
the
that
selectmen's
language.
next meeting
your
is the
email
end of
is the
August.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
I-
I can,
Need backup.
I can delay I have 30 days to respond, so I can delay my response for a couple of weeks to give time for.
Give you time for the second
Do the
meeting.
selectmen meet, they meet
In
every.
10 days. Right now, we're on an every other week schedule.
Yeah, because of
Yeah.
the summer schedule.
So I can delay my response slightly to give more time for conversation with, Gail Kelleher to whatever, what do you?
Linda has perhaps something.
So this Gail Kelleher called me and left me a message wanting to speak with me. We didn't connect, and so I was planning to contact her after this meeting.
Okay. Perhaps just a roadmap forward, if you were willing to come into the selectmen's meeting on the 26th, kind of go over the option, lay out the fourth option, and see what is entailed in the fourth option. We'll do a little bit of homework if anyone else wants to meet with Gail Kelleher. I mean, I'm here, so I'm willing to do that, but if someone wants to join me, I'm fine with that too, just to kind of see from our perspective that, I guess it would be good for the selectmen to have us as a as an affordable housing trust, say to them, if you want to refer to us, we're willing to take it on to do the lottery.
I'm not sure Larry is. I'm not sure I am either. That's why I'm asking the question
Yeah.
about,
I mean,
what does this look like after you get?
As a Harwich resident, I'm not sure. I mean, I think the thing is, if you can have a smooth relationship with an entity that's used to doing it, then I think it's a great thing I was surprised that I really feel that my rationale is correct, where a developer, towns and counties do administration, compliance, whatever. I was surprised when they said in advance they were not gonna do it, so that kind of leaves the town. I'm not sure I can be present at the 26th. Gail might be the more informative person to have before the Board of Selectmen, but I'm happy for any communications in advance of that, or any information we could draft for the town. So maybe if we can keep conversation fluid and cooperative in the meantime, and I do think it's helpful if an entity takes responsibility for assisting, because they help with these kinds of questions that you've raised, if there needs to be a price adjustment, that kind of thing.
So at the end of your 30 days, does the town then get an additional 30 days to decide?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
So if you could wait a little.
I would urge that everyone squint at, whoever is vested from this committee to squint at the language, do your own squinting. I don't want to.
But the folks, I'm sure the folks that live in the unit have made their mind up to move somewhere. They want to
would
move
love-
on it.
Yeah, they would love to move.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, they'd love to move in October. I
fair
don't
to
know if
just
they need the money from this to
stretch 'em
move,
out.
or sometimes we had an instance in Falmouth where and actually it worked better to market. She had it all cleaned out and moved because of her wherewithal to make that move, and then the unit sold, about a month later. But I don't know if she's dependent upon getting her, the principal the asset that she's built over time in order to do that. I haven't spoken with her on
But
that.
Larry's right. I mean, that's the real problem for us, is that we're looking at, in fairness, we're trying to help the person get out of the house and go somewhere, and then get somebody else into the house. So at a fair price, with a lottery, without a lottery, with an organization, without. So we need to kind of know as much as we can up front, as soon as we can, so that we can facilitate that.
Yeah.
Because I know that stalling would be appealing, because ultimately it gives us more time to be
Right.
able to figure out our options, but it also puts her in the position where she still has the house. She wants to move on.
Yeah, my part wasn't to stall. My
Yeah.
part was that I
No, I
think when
get
it goes to the Board of Selectmen, do we want to offer to the Board of Selectmen that we're willing to tackle this? Or do we want to say, it's not an order of magnitude that we're looking for, and pursue option 4? That's kind of what I was thinking.
And that's
what
really why I
direction
wanted
we're
all these
going.
questions answered here,
Yeah.
because I figured by the time 10 days goes on, we should know exactly what we're putting on the agenda for the selectmen, and it's already 2/3 of the way to that discussion.
Would it be worth reaching out, and I'm happy to do this if you want, to the home folks and say, this is up, this is, they want to sell it, what is the maximum selling price we can go to? Are they the ones who establish that based
Oh,
on?
so there's
or-
been I'm sorry, Belinda's been CC'd in it all. There's already been, it's Renee, what's her full name? But they're already,
Penny Hammond.
there's already communication you can jump into and ask them, you know,
Oh,
it's
okay.
Beth Alpert and this other person. There's an email
Okay.
thread you can be pulled into to get them to affirm it.
Yeah,
and,
I think we need to affirm that.
Yeah, and
So maybe what we can do is, if Charlene and Belinda would meet with this Gail Kelleher and Renee, kind of get material to present to the selectmen, just an overview of the options. And then, I don't think we need to necessarily take a formal action and wait for, if the selectmen want to refer.
We won't be able to get you that information in time for the meeting on the 26th. Because Belinda's not back in working with us until next Thursday. So, because of their limited hours that they have.
Right.
So, but if you can
Yeah,
share
15
those
is
with
pretty
me, I'll start having conversations with Renee.
Okay.
I would also mention, I don't think any homeowner wants a committee walking through their house, but she might be very happy to have one of the two staff people sitting here, or not, you're kind of high in rank to want you to walk through your house, but one of the town staff plus Gail to have a meeting over there, see the condition of the
Right.
unit, talk through. That might expedite things, and I'm happy to be on any communications with the county, so those are two things that might expedite things.
I think if you could do at least a write-up that you had kind of offered
Yeah.
to do of your suggestions,
Yeah.
that may be helpful for.
Why don't I see where
deliberate-
things have, and at which meeting it's gonna go on, and as we get closer, I will do that.
So do we not want to take any official action on this and wait for the report to come back, or what's
I
the
would
pleasure
think
of the
just,
board?
you know, see what the Board of Selectmen would like to do and see the results of what you find out there, you know, that puts a little more perspective. Does the county want to do anything?
Well, it sounds like they've already opted out, so
Yeah, they don't want to.
we're up, I guess, to, well, the selectmen are up to
You
decide
know, and the
what they
bottom
want.
line is, I suppose if, you know, it takes a lot of time, but that is probably not a bad thing to say, yeah, we help with this, and, you know, one family is living in a new unit, and that's an easy lift then.
I mean, I guess my thought was if we just have to coordinate it.
Yeah.
And we can add it to the purchase price and contract out the lottery,
Yep.
then really it's staff time and our time, but we get we
Yeah,
continue to have a
I think
unit that's on our
It's a bit of a win
inventory.
situation.
Or we hire Ms.
Provided you don't have
Fuller,
an
she
oil
works
leak.
for HAC,
How's
correct?
CAC, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, this will come up again, that's the
Yeah.
only weird, because it's
Absolutely.
always the developer, or sometimes, you know, a private developer, I don't think, ends up on the deed writer, so then it's the
Right.
town and DHCD, so then you'll have your kind of system set up.
Yeah, this won't be the
Yeah, now,
last.
when you mention that, some of the ones that I worked on in the past, they'd get 2 or 3 a month, every single month.
Yeah,
And they had a very specific way to deal with it.
yeah, then you're ready.
Okay.
Would there be a way, now that the property would transfer, to update this to a DHCD deed writer?
Question.
Discuss that with the county.
Okay.
If DHCD is willing to accept it, then yes. Otherwise, I would also say on future resales, it would be more expedient to have it just be the town and the county. There would be no reason for Habitat to be in there
Right, I
on
think
the
somehow the
next
deed writer
generation.
needs to,
Yeah, and,
Usually when they
Yeah.
redo those, Charlene, they're redone certainly with a time period on it, because the time period doesn't run till the rivers run dry. There's an ending.
So are
But the ending
we,
is usually a long time in the future.
we have about a half hour left, so I just want
Oh,
to make sure we have a
thank you very-
chance to go through the whole.
Thank
But so if you
Thank you
could,
very much.
if you could provide that information to us, and then maybe if we could get some information to have for the Board of Selectmen, and then,
I'd be happy to, if you guys reach out, if it fits my schedule, I will be happy to help. I did real estate for 7 years and worked with first-time homeowners a lot, so,
yeah, that's
a long time ago, but I'm familiar with it a little bit.
Thank you so much.
yeah,
and
thank
I
you very much
appreciate-
for bringing it
I
to us.
appreciate the spirit of the group to help make it happen for this original home buyer, so thank you.
Thank you.
And for
Thank
the
you.
future one. Okay,
Yeah.
great, thanks.
Okay, Housing Coordinator report.
Harwich Affordable Housing Trust balance for August, $75,214.43. CPA funds are the same, $470,000 for annual town meeting 2018 and $340,000 for annual town meeting 2019, which brings your total to $885,214.43. In your handout, there's the July balance, so you have a gain of $50.60.
Wow, let's party.
We can run a lottery on that.
That's about all it's worth.
Okay, thank you. On the
Sorry,
subsidized
Chris.
housing inventory?
One more thing, the FY 20 10% CPC allocation for housing, Carol indicated that it was $168,411.
168.
Say that number one more
Wait a minute,
time.
say that again?
$168,411.
What was that?
And what was that for, though?
The 10% CPC allocation.
Oh, the 10% CPC allocation, thank you.
Housing allocation.
That's what I was concerned about, how big the bucket was.
Thank you.
On the SHI monitoring update, this was originally meant to be a standing agenda item, but because the inventory is in good shape and the only units that were gonna fall off have already been refinanced and updated on the SHI list, we do not have an update, which is a good thing. But just so you know, Belinda continues to work on building the property files. It's a very long, ongoing process. She's actually been working on this in Chatham for longer, and it's proven to be a long process to get all the records. So just keep working on it. There aren't any units that we're concerned about, and we're obviously monitoring units that are going to be coming up for expiration in the future, and we'll deal with them before that happens.
Excellent, thank you.
Now, on the action plan, you'll recall it at the last meeting, I gave you the draft scope of work, and I asked for feedback on it. I did not receive any feedback, so my understanding is that the scope of work as it is in the packet is the final scope of work. So I just want to make sure that you all agree on that. I've also included a list of qualified consultants or individuals that we could solicit for the action plan. You asked that I give you 3. I think I have
You did 5.
5. So more than 3, which is a good thing, including some local folks as well. So my question there is whether you have anyone additional that I should consider. And unless there's any further discussion or questions, the plan is to put the solicitation out tomorrow through a formal process and give a deadline of 3 weeks from tomorrow so that I can report back on responses at the next meeting.
Is 3 weeks a normal turnaround, just with the Labor Day?
They'll work to the deadline.
Yeah, I mean,
Work to the deadline anyway.
we can make adjustments depending
Hey, I'll
on the
get
response.
Yeah,
I think it's gonna be fine.
yeah.
I think it will do.
So why don't you get that sent out, and we'll wait for the results to come back?
Great.
For the next meeting, thank you.
Moving forward. That's excellent. You want to talk about the Facebook guidelines, Glenda?
Yes, so we submitted the Facebook guidelines in your packet. Did you guys have any input or feedback?
As long as it avoids comments.
Yeah, it's gonna avoid comments.
Yeah,
It's
so
just, it's nice for us to have some lines to color in with regard to what we're posting. Some other informal conversations we've had that have been good ideas for what content could be is if there's a vote of the trust, that could be a post, for example, not letting people only have to go through the entire packet to learn what's going on to be more transparent. And also land inventory updates might also be of particular interest to the public. And Belinda was looking at some of the reach on some of the posts that are already on there, and which one was it that had reached 100 people already?
So far, I've posted our last trust meeting video. I've posted the flyer to come talk to the housing coordinator. So that flyer actually reached to 100 people.
Which is interesting, because not 100 people have not liked the page, but just gives you an indication of who's
Reading.
consuming it. Yeah. So we're developing a quick and dirty community engagement strategy for the trust, which is going to be kind of Facebook focused, while we are waiting for some other specific initiatives. Like, for example, once we have some more information about Sisson Road, perhaps you want to consider doing a community forum on that. In the meantime, we'll just kind of focus on getting information out through Facebook, and we'll do a little write-up on the strategy for that. But that's what we got so far.
Yeah, the idea of having like key milestones is a good one.
Yeah.
Because people don't like slogging through packets and stuff and votes. Something that's a highlight gets voted on, and as long as it's nothing that we're future looking at, so we're moved into a deliberation, we're fine. And I think this is great that you're doing this, the page, that's how people, and you're right, nobody actually, unless they really do like the page, they're there for information for stuff like this.
But we do hope people will like the page, so.
Yeah, that's normally a
That's the word
mechanism
we're
though
trying
to
to put
share
out.
with your friends that I like the ABC movie theater. And if I like it, then it goes out to Judith because she's one of my friends.
Well, that's true, but I do
I
also
like the
want to
spiral
say,
of it.
the nice thing about liking the page is you get the posts show up on your feed, and you get notifications for it. So
Right.
if you really want to hear about housing updates, it's best to
Call it a
like
wine tasting page.
the page.
So everybody
see
out there,
that.
please like our Facebook page.
Yes.
Exactly.
So the next, and speaking about liking our page, the next project is to create a flyer to like the trust Facebook page and give it to Caleb or Jamie and post it on their Facebook to kind of have the fire department, the library like our page,
To start getting the word
just
out.
to start getting the word out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As usual, the last month's report is in there, and I will not get into it unless you have questions.
Item I, discussion and potential vote on the formal meeting schedule for every Thursday of the month at 2 p.m. and informal meetings to be scheduled in the evening.
I have a suggestion that I'd like to put to the committee,
Go
if I
ahead.
may. So, as somebody who's finding it challenging to schedule because of working hours, and as somebody who, if I had moved here today, would be seeking affordable housing. I was lucky enough to be a teacher at Chatham High School 20 years ago and take a part-time job with a real estate agent to get more money in the summers and on school vacations. And a fixer-upper came into the office, and that's how I happened to buy a home here on Cape Cod. So I think it's imperative that we as a committee meet at a time when everyone from the community can come in and get to that podium and speak, not just watch us on the TV loop. So I would like to propose that on the even months, we have evening meetings, and on the odd months, we meet at 2 o'clock during the day.
Let's have a discussion.
I'll make a comment on that. I sat through, what, Charlene, 11 or 12 years of planning board meetings
At least.
on Tuesday night at 6:30, I think. And with very rare exceptions, the crowd that you see right now is the crowd that we always had. That has everything to do with what happens in the town. If you're not that much interested in planning, that 6 or 7, more than 5 or 6 people come out for a meeting, you could have it at 7 o'clock in the morning, would make no difference.
Can I
I
jump in
agree with-
and?
Hold on, let's get input from everyone.
So as a result, I think this time is fine. And because if you move it to evening meetings, the idea that other people are gonna come.
No, every
is
other month, every other month.
Every other month, you could have it every other year, it still isn't gonna make that much difference.
I kind of agree with what Larry's saying, and just for how it was stated, the informational meetings, like the forum we had, I thought that was great, because it showed action for people coming here and what to expect, and they can participate. Sitting here is, it can be a little boring for, but if we had an action meeting, like the forum, I think that was a great idea, and we had a great turnout for that, and that was in the evening, so.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Don?
Yeah, I kind of strongly agree with Judith. There's a reason behind this. I understand what Larry's saying. I sat in the planning board for 6 years myself, and then selectman and often in selectman again. I get what you're saying, but it doesn't affect people's lives in the same way. The site plan comes in, it doesn't have anything to do with me. It might have something to do with me if I'm living next to it, but it really has nothing to do with me if it's in West Harwich and I'm in East Harwich. This has a consumer element to it. I mean, and it also has some parts of this. you'd want the public to actually participate in it so you don't wind up falling off a cliff at the end because you went so far down a particular road without public input that the first time you found out about the public input, it wasn't positive. The reason I asked for the golf to come in, the reason that we hashed out things with Rios, thankfully, and amicably, was because I didn't want to get way down the road and find out that there was some sort of objection to something. We're not really getting anybody but stakeholders showing up here. Laura Schufalt shows up, or there's another guest of some sort that shows up. The general public generally hasn't been cruising in, and precisely the people that we're talking about that we want to service are in a position where they've got no leeway at all. They may have to actually get unpaid leave to leave for 2 hours to come here in the afternoon.
Exactly.
And at least make an attempt somewhere for some random meetings at night, just to see if we can get some participation. If we're wrong, that would be readily apparent after 4 or 5 go-rounds and say, okay, Harry was right, nobody's going to come. But I don't see the harm in at least trying it, not to the exclusion of the day meetings, but alternate, see what happens, and if nobody cares, plus which we've got a Facebook page, which puts us miles ahead of everybody else in the government here, because nobody else has Facebook but the fire department and library and police department. And it's a consumer-based thing. This is retail, this particular thing. The other things that we're talking about are wholesale and geeky.
Yeah, we'll find out just how retail it is when the first big development comes down the road, yeah?
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
But that's matching up a customer with something that they may or may not want. This has to do with us making policies and policy decisions and spending the house money. The project is not the same as what we choose to prioritize and what we want to put in a particular place.
Would that result in additional funding to have Belinda at those meetings as well if we exceed the hours for the week?
She wouldn't be here.
Well, I mean, for the meetings at night.
For the meetings at night.
Wouldn't
'cause
that be a
she's-
push?
I don't understand a push.
If there were 3 hours that's not spent on the Thursday afternoon, but they are spent on Thursday night, isn't that a push?
But if
It's the
she's
same
not,
3
if
hours?
she's not available to people during
Right.
the day to talk to?
She'd be available.
Black out that day.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess my 2 cents, I think it makes sense to keep going with the Thursdays
That's fine by me.
at 2, and then we will definitely, as far as I'm concerned, hold as many informational meetings as we need to reach
So does
out
that
and
mean
obtain
you're
that.
not going to have a vote because that's the way you think, or
Excuse me,
as
but
far as you're
everyone
concerned?
was given an opportunity to comment, so I just wanted to provide my own comments. I'm happy to take a motion to formally vote the schedule that we're going to adopt.
Isn't that what is in the
That's what's in there, yeah,
Yeah, more-
discussion and potential vote.
potential vote?
Even as chair, I run the meeting, but I'm still entitled to comment. Is there a motion to,
I'd like to make a motion that we do alternate months for a set period of time,
What do you want to make that?
6 months, 4 months, 6 months?
is there a second?
I'd second that for 6 months.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion, say
Aye.
aye. All opposed? Aye. Okay. Two in favor, 3 opposed. Is there a motion to have the schedule as laid out in the agenda?
I motion for the formal meeting to be scheduled every third Thursday on the month at 2 PM.
And is there a second?
Second.
And then discussion? All in
That's depe-
favor?
Depending on the availability of rooms. We have enough rooms in here, don't we? We can hold it any place.
Well, we block this off to the end of the year at 2 o'clock.
Oh, no, I mean nighttime meetings.
Yeah, but I don't think
Well,
we,
if there's a, if I may,
informational one.
producer,
Yeah.
if there's an informational meeting or a forum or whatever, yeah, we'll figure out where
Okay.
it needs to be, and it may not even be on a Thursday, last time it was on a Tuesday night,
Okay.
so.
And we can always revisit this later on. And have
Absolutely.
a motion to change the meeting. So I think within the first year, just have a little consistency, I think it'd be nice, and then really wrap our heads around what's best for the community.
So
Just to be clear that there's absolutely no business that's going on in the informational meeting. It's us talking, them listening,
Yes, correct.
because that's what that is.
The way we did that forum was a little bit different. We let them speak where we sat. Remember, we sat in the background. We weren't set up in this. It was a more
There's
casual.
no, there's
So
no
different ways to
trust
do it.
meeting.
Take
But we
action.
can-
There's no trust
We can
actions
post
that we
things
can.
to have meetings, if we're gonna take an action in the nighttime meeting, we could just post it to that.
Yeah, we could post that.
I think
sure.
the intention is to have informational meetings.
I think you're missing the point, though, is to allow the general public, especially the folks that
I am-
probably will be applying for this, who cannot come here during the day, gentlemen, because they're working.
I understand.
I have a challenge being here during the day.
Okay. There's been discussion. All in favor of the schedule as exists? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
3-2. Next meeting date, September 12th at 2 PM.
You missed something.
What did I miss?
No, just
Oh,
the
I'm
flyer.
sorry.
There's no presentation on this. I actually forgot that we had planned for me to do a presentation at the next meeting. So this is just the flyer so that you're all aware that registration is
Well, why
open.
don't you take a minute? We have 10 minutes before our next meeting. Charlene and I need to
I have a
prepare for
PowerPoint for next month, that's why.
that. Oh, okay.
But,
I like cool graphics.
yeah, this is just to say that registration has been formally open for a while, actually, for the 2019 Lower Cape Housing Institute. On our website at capecdp.org, you can find descriptions of all of the sessions. These are the dates and the session titles. They're all going to take place at the Eastham Public Library on Wednesdays from 6 to 8:30, October 2nd through November 6th. I will say that, as usual, these are specifically for elected and appointed municipal officials and town staff. And we have also opened it up to new boards and committees that we had not formally invited before, including open space and conservation groups, as well as RIOs, Chatham 365, for example. We're trying to be more inclusive this year. Another thing that I will say is that one of the things that we're trying to deal with at the Housing Institute this year is the historical tension between open space and housing. We actually have a session dedicated to that. That is October 16th, zoning for housing to protect open space, and I notice that that correlates with one of your strategies on your housing production plan, so that might be of particular interest. But like I said, I'll do a formal presentation at the September meeting and get a little more into what the sessions will include.
Can I ask a question? Can we sign up if we know we have to miss one of them?
That's another thing that's different this year, is you don't have to sign up for all 6, you can do it a la carte.
Oh, great.
Nice.
Thank you.
And they're all free, of course.
Nice,
Okay.
thank you.
Chris?
Next meeting date is September.
Chris, sorry. I have one question.
She's very quiet. She's not like me.
I just wanted to know who here would like to attend the Pine Oaks resident luncheon. And so it is happening on September 12th at 12 p.m., and that is a Thursday.
I will not be.
What date?
September 12th at 6?
12.
At 12 p.m.
Hard to have lunch at
Oh, so
6.
it'll be right before the meeting.
I'd like to,
Which
but
phase
I'm
is
out
it
of
at?
town.
Okay.
Down on Bank Street?
Yeah, do you know the location?
It's phase 2, I believe.
Bank Street.
Yeah.
It's the common room, yeah.
We can give details to those who are interested in attending, but
On
you're all
Bank-
invited.
On
Yeah.
Bank Street.
On Bank.
On Bank, yep.
I
Yeah,
sent
this
out the
is central.
details via email.
Yeah, we did some work there last year, so.
Yeah.
If we are going to have a majority of the board there, then we do need to post it as a meeting.
September
So-
12th?
That time.
September 12th at-
I am
in,
actually
Neiman.
available to go to that September
Meeting.
12th at
When's
12.
that?
Dawn, you said yes, you're able
At
to
Pine
go.
Oaks.
Do we anticipate, are either one of you able?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll post it. Why don't we post that as a meeting? And it's just an informational informal meeting to attend.
She'll send out, it's a,
Don't tarry at the lunch, though, because 2 hours later,
so once again, September 12th
September
2 hours
12th.
later, we'll be
September
here.
12th.
That's
At
a Thursday.
at 12.
At 12.
Sorry, that was my,
So,
And then what you're
Noon.
going to talk about is 2 hours after this.
So
2
there's
hours
lunch
after
and then
this.
there's a meeting,
yeah, it
correct?
would be a meeting.
Yeah.
I'm just pointing that out,
Yeah,
guys.
we'll do 2 different.
They'll post it for
different postings.
4-hour meeting.
We're driving in between.
Okay, thank you. Motion to adjourn?
Oh, do
So
you want to
moved.
explain why we're actually not meeting on the 3rd, even though you guys just voted?
Because I have
there
another
a-
town obligation
Yeah.
and I won't be back in town until 4 o'clock.
So, I'm sorry, I missed,
September
is-
12th. is
The
si-
12th
both
is
dates
2
happen.
o'clock. Normally, it would be the 19th is the
Oh,
3rd.
we're not meeting on the 19th?
No, it's the 12th. I won't be available. I'll be available later, but,
Okay.
okay. So, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.